Thank you for listening to this presentation on a different perspective of women's liberation movement. From 1957 to 1963, the American Broadcast Company entertained audiences with their television hit Leave It to Beaver. Today's family would likely view this show with a certain amount of cynicism. June, the mother, is at home cooking and cleaning and tending to her family's needs. Ward, the father, is busy working his 9-to-5 stable job that allows them to live in the suburbs, own a car, and live comfortably. The boys, Wally and the Beaver, are polite, well-adjusted, respectful young men. Is this family structure realistic in today's homes? Why? What has changed? The role June plays has certainly changed since that time. Research shows that the women's liberation movement has detrimental effects on marriage, children, and a woman's self-image. First, let's talk about how this movement affected the institution of marriage. As the movement gained momentum, respected scholars began to sound off not only about the oppression of women, but how marriage perpetuated this. In 1972, Jessie Bernard, a feminist and sociologist at Pennsylvania State University, stated that marriage was a harmful institution. She went further, saying that only women who were psychologically ailing could claim to be fulfilled by it. Only women of sound mind could express their dissatisfaction under the suppression of marriage. This ideology gained credibility when the Centers for Women's Study created an award in Bernard's name. According to Kay O'Brien in 2006, advocates of this movement had little research to back up any of these claims. In fact, Linda Waite, a professor at the University of Chicago, conducted a study that found 41% of women and 38% of men reported high satisfactions in being married. Despite reports to the contrary, the popularity of marriage continues to decline. Kay O'Brien often also reports in her novel Women Who Make the World Worse in 2006 that a survey conducted in the United States found that high school seniors polled, less than half of them believed they would be happier as married. So where do men stand on this issue? In 1986, politician George Gilder stated that traditional roles of women keep society running. According to Gilder, society is put at risk without these defined roles. In 1972, professor of sociology Stephen Goldberg argued that society may break down if women attain too much power. His argument stated that if women gain power, men would become obsolete. And so it seems, at least in traditional vocabulary, that may be so. In 1996, C. Ramming reported that traditional women saw hard workers, good providers, as desirable qualities in men. Dr. Lorraine Zappert discussed what contemporary women seek in a spouse. Women of today seek men with reasonable limits and differentiated self. So as the attitudes of marriage has changed, how does this phenomenon affect children in this society? The movement has gotten women out of the home and into the workplace, as women no longer need men to consider themselves successful. Marriage is on the decline, and divorce is climbing. According to Kay O'Brien, in 1960, less than 10% of children lived in a home with one parent. 10%, as shown in this graph. In 2006, close to 1/3 of children are born into women that are not married. Feminists tell women that they can raise children alone. But what is best for the children? The National Fatherhood Initiative reports that a child is twice as likely to be abused in a home with one parent. Further, they state that boys who are raised without the benefit of both biological parents double their chances of being incarcerated or engaging in drug use. Childcare is another obstacle facing women who work outside the home. Studies tend to be mixed on the benefits and detriments to the children in daycare. A government study found that the longer a child remained in daycare over the course of a day, the more the child exhibited undesirable behaviors. Kay O'Brien reported that the inability to comply Trouble with kindness and cooperation were the culprits. Feminists, in turn, reported that a child considered abrasive would likely be very successful in the business world. Are mothers sacrificing their bonds with their children to work outside the home? O'Brien reports that a study in 1999, aptly named a daycare study, said no. The study concluded that children saw no ill effects of their mother working outside the home. According to L. Kaufman and M. Quigley, studies to the contrary are hard to find. They report that there is a general consensus that support for stay-at-home moms will reverse any progress made by the women's liberation movement thus far. The movement tells women that they can work and contribute to society, the demands of their families and careers ushering a contradictory existence. What are the effects of this movement on women themselves? According to Martha Beck in 1997, the price of having it all is proving to be exhausting. She reports that women take personal responsibility for the happiness of all the people in their environment. When women work outside the home, they, many times, still pull the same duties inside the home. The role of caretaker at home and career woman at the office often collide. Elle Zappert reports that women pay high emotional prices attempting to meet the needs of everyone in their lives. The toll of meeting the needs of marriage, children, and boardrooms usher in conflict. Martha Beck calls this conflict the emotional paradox. Beck describes the paradox as a situation women find themselves in when society dictates a recipe for success only to contradict its own advice. Being a good mother is the most important job in the world, but the pay stinks. Beck reports a good mother sacrifices herself for her children and in family in general. However, to be considered a personal success, she must be educated, employed, and available to her career. Inevitably, these two responsibilities will collide at some point. When they do, women will be at the breaking point. Let's look at the visual aid. For our example, we have an agenda of a typical mother. At 10 a.m., she may have a meeting with her boss at work. 12 p.m., a working lunch with a client. 2 o'clock, she has to leave to go to teacher conferences. But at 5 o'clock, there's a conflict. There's an emergency project that's due at work, but it's also opening night for Little League Baseball. So this is the emotional paradox. The breaking point happens at the choice. What will happen if she chooses her family over her work, or her work over her family? Choosing family events suggests that women lack professionalism. Choosing work suggests women are not making family a priority. There is no answer. In summary, the effects of women's liberation and marriage is clear. In the early days of the movement, radical views spread to academic universities where they gained credibility. Views began to change as younger generations no longer viewed marriage as a viable, beneficial institution. As the tides began to change on society's view of marriage, these ideologies led to a trickle-down effect on how we raise our children. As children are being raised in more single-parent households and women work outside the home, the daycare dilemma continues to plague women. But perhaps the most profound negative effect on women is the woman's well-being. The emotional paradox leaves women empty, unfulfilled, and exhausted. The difficulty of performing two full-time jobs simultaneously and seamlessly is an impossible task, yet we expect it from ourselves and female counterparts daily. We internalize criticisms that society gives us, and we spiral into guilt and blame when these traditional and modern responsibilities collide. What started as a movement for equality drove down a much more complex road. So research suggests that women's liberation movement had a detrimental effect on marriage, children, and a woman's self-image. In closing, Superman or Superwoman does not exist. Help one another. Resist the emotional paradox. We cannot do it all. No one can.